Single nuclear weapon today could kill millions in just minutes.
Yesterday, Tulsi Gabbard put out this super bizarre, creepy video in which she was talking about how humanity could get wiped out by nuclear war. And then she finished it by kind of trying to implicate anyone who opposes Russia in wanting nuclear war, as if those are the only two options.
As we stand here today, closer to the brink of nuclear annihilation than ever before, political elite and warmongers are carelessly fomenting fear and tensions between nuclear powers. Perhaps it's because they are confident that they will have access to nuclear shelters for themselves and for their families that regular people won't have access to.
Like, we either have to give Russia everything it wants every time it invades any other country, or we want the world to die in a nuclear holocaust. And in reality, that makes no sense at all, because in fact, giving in to Russia is the pro-nuclear war position. If we give in to Russia because they have nukes, then what we're telling every country in the world that doesn't have nukes is they need to get them. And so far, the United States has been pretty good at nuclear non-proliferation. We've worked with first the Soviet Union, now Russia and China to try to make sure that nukes don't spread everywhere. Trump's policy is just very pro-nuclear. But the really interesting thing about this is right after she makes this video about how nuclear war would be so awful, due to Trump's incompetence, Israel is now bombing Iran. And that significantly raises the risk of nuclear war because Israel is a nuclear power and Iran is a near nuclear power. They have the ability to get nukes. Experts believe it would take a couple of weeks. But one bright spot before we finish about nuclear war, which is Tulsi Gabbard in her thing. She is fear-mongering about nuclear war a lot. And one of the things she says is that nuclear war could result in a nuclear winter, so much smoke up into the air with all the cities burning that it would actually blot out the sun and all of humanity starves to death. We feel pretty confident that's not going to happen. Back in the 80s, Carl Sagan and a few other scientists did these calculations where they said, well, if with these gigantic nuclear stockpiles, we target the cities and the cities go up in flames, the soot could stay up in the atmosphere for years, up in the upper stratosphere, and block out the sun, which would kill everybody. But there's a couple of things about that. First off, those calculations were done in the 80s. Back in the 80s, the US and the Soviet Union at the time had way more nukes than the US or Russia has today. Just a lot, an absurd number of nukes, more than you could ever need. And because they weren't very accurate, their strategies were to inflict maximum damage by targeting cities. Nowadays, the strategy is to inflict damage by targeting military installations. Now, that actually might make nuclear war slightly more likely, because if you really thought you could target all of your opponent's nuclear installations to a point that it wouldn't even be worth it for them to respond, then it makes it more likely that you might launch. Also, if you're worried they might target your nuclear installations, then you might be incentivized to strike first. But it does significantly decrease the risk of a nuclear winter, something which a lot of people starve. And the other thing about that is that humans are pretty inventive. Back in the 80s, we didn't know how we would feed people if the sun just was blotted out. But now we actually have some pretty good ideas. You can, for example, just one simple idea, convert wood pulp to calories that people can actually consume. Like, it's kind of like a carbohydrate type thing. And it doesn't have a ton of nutrients, but you can get nutrients from other things. We have some stored food. We have, some seafood that would keep growing. And actually, we do have a pretty good idea that we could feed people. During a disaster, experts usually have a worse case scenario than what actually happens, because those experts, they're very smart, they're very good at their jobs, but there's only a few of them working on a problem. In the event of an actual disaster, then everyone starts working on a problem. And we come up with solutions much more quickly than people would expect. One example is COVID. Most experts believe that COVID would keep going for years and years. And in that case, it actually would have made sense to reopen the country and just let COVID spread around, because you're not going to get a vaccine for 5 or 10 years. And that's why Sweden did that. They actually were listening to epidemiologists and experts when they reopened their country, and a lot of people died. But then in reality, we actually got vaccines in like under a year, actually, I think, when they started producing the first ones. And the reason why that happened so much faster is because it became important for a lot of very smart people to work on it, not just a few. And it would be the same with feeding people. Even if nuclear winter did happen, which again is actually pretty unlikely right now, we have way less nukes, we're targeting different things, and the original calculations were probably just wrong. We have better examples now of widespread bushfires, which also spread very rapidly. And the soot didn't stay in the stratosphere for years and years. And in fact, it had no measurable impact on the climate whatsoever. So very unlikely that we would get a nuclear winter in any case, but even if it did happen, we would be able to feed people. I mean, life would suck for a little bit. I'm still not pro-nuclear war. And in fact, for these reasons, as well as for the reasons that the United States has a missile defense system now that we feel very confident in, and the fact that Israel and Iran are going to war right now, the chance that at least one nuclear weapon gets used, I think, is still going up. We have a very unstable president, and he's weak on the international stage. But the chance that we have a full nuclear exchange is pretty slim right now. Also, because Ukraine took out quite a few Russian strategic bombers, now we know that's an option as well, right? You wouldn't even have to launch a nuke. You could just completely incapacitate your enemy before they even strike. So anyway, that's a little note of optimism. We're not going to get a nuclear holocaust, probably. Some other kind of troubling stuff going on. I mean, Trump is just making everything way worse, and it's still shocking to me in a sense. I mean, you study history and people are always stupid, but it still feels different to live through it. Hopefully we can educate people and change the world. That's my hope here.